She only wanted a moment of freedom. But what she found was a battlefield, a dying man, and a name that would shatter everything she thought she knew. Who's this Comanche warrior, and how did he know her? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The hot Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Sarah Mitchell's back as she guided her horse through the rugged terrain. At 24, she had known little beyond the confines of Fort Davis, where her father served as the military doctor. The year was 1874, and the tension between settlers and the native Comanche tribes had reached a breaking point. "Stay close to the fort, Sarah," her father had warned that morning. "There's been word of Comanche activity to the west." But Sarah had always been willful. The stifling routines of fort life left her yearning for adventure, for something beyond the endless cycle of social gatherings and marriage proposals from officers she could barely tolerate. The distant sound of gunfire broke her reverie. Sarah pulled on the reins, bringing her mare to a halt. The shots had come from beyond the ridge ahead. Common sense told her to turn back, but curiosity pushed her forward. "Just a quick look," she whispered to her horse, patting its neck reassuringly. As she crested the ridge, the scene below made her blood run cold. Bodies lay scattered across a small clearing, soldiers from the fort and Comanche warriors. The skirmish appeared to have ended only moments ago. Sarah dismounted, her medical training, learned at her father's side, compelling her forward. Most were beyond help, their vacant eyes staring at the cloudless sky. She moved among them, checking for signs of life, finding none. Then she heard it, a weak groan from behind a cluster of rocks. Sarah rushed over to find a wounded Comanche warrior, blood seeping from a gunshot wound in his chest. His dark eyes widened at the sight of her, a mixture of pain and something else. Recognition? "White ... medicine, woman," he struggled in broken English. "Don't speak," Sarah instructed, kneeling beside him and tearing a strip from her petticoat to press against his wound. The warrior grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Sarah," he whispered. She froze, her heart hammering in her chest. "How do you know my name?" His eyes were intense, burning with urgency. "Found ... your father's journal, when we raided ... wagon train. He spoke of you." "My father never lost a journal," Sarah replied, confusion etched on her face. "Not him," the warrior coughed, blood speckling his lips. "My father ... Blue Eagle." "I don't understand," Sarah said, continuing to apply pressure to his wound. "My name?" "Thomas Rivers," he managed. "Half Comanche ... half white. Your father ... knew my mother." Before Sarah could process this revelation, the sound of approaching horses reached them. The warrior, Thomas, gripped her arm tighter. "They will kill me," he whispered urgently. "And you." "For helping me." Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't leave him to die, but returning to the fort with a Comanche warrior would be impossible. She made her decision quickly. "There's an abandoned settler's cabin about 2 miles east of here," she said, helping him to his feet. "Can you ride?" Thomas nodded weakly. With great effort, Sarah helped him onto her horse and mounted behind him, supporting his weight against her chest. "Why that help me?" he asked as they rode away from the battlefield. Sarah wasn't entirely sure herself. "Because you know my name," she answered simply. As they disappeared into the hills, neither noticed the lone soldier watching from a distance, his face hardening as he turned his horse back toward Fort Davis. In the small cabin, Sarah worked diligently to extract the bullet from Thomas's chest. He remained conscious throughout the painful procedure, his teeth clenched against the pain. "The journal," Sarah said as she bandaged his wound. "What else did it say?" Thomas's eyes met hers. That he loved her. That he wanted to marry her, but couldn't because of who they were. "Who was she, your mother?" "Mourning Dove," Thomas replied. "Daughter of the chief. They met when your father was captured." She convinced them to spare him. Sarah sat back, trying to reconcile this information with what she knew of her father. "And you? How did you end up with the Comanche?" "My mother died when I was born." Blue Eagle raised me as his son, but I always knew I was different. His eyes closed briefly. I learned English from traders, read whenever I could. A noise outside startled them both. Sarah moved to the window, peering cautiously through the dirty glass. Nothing but the wind rustling through the scrub brush. "We can't stay here long," she said, turning back to Thomas. "By morning, they'll be searching for both of us." Thomas attempted to sit up, wincing with the effort. Why risk everything for a stranger? Sarah thought about her life at the fort, the constrained existence that had never felt quite right. "Maybe I've been waiting for something to change," she admitted. "Something to make sense of this life." As night fell, Sarah knew she had crossed a line from which there would be no easy return. Her life had irrevocably changed the moment she had stumbled onto that battlefield and heard her name on the lips of a dying Comanche warrior who wasn't really Comanche at all. Dawn broke with an ominous crimson glow across the horizon. Sarah had managed only a few hours of fitful sleep, constantly alert to any sound that might signal approaching soldiers. Thomas's condition had stabilized somewhat, though fever now gripped him, his skin alternating between burning hot and shivering cold. "We need to move," Sarah said, gathering the few supplies she had brought in her saddlebag. "The search parties will expand their radius once they realize we've disappeared." Thomas struggled to sit up, his face contorted with pain. "There's a place," he said between labored breaths. "A canyon ... 3 days' ride west. My people have a small camp there, away from the fighting." "Your people?" Sarah questioned. "The Comanche?" A shadow crossed his face. "I belong to both worlds and to neither. But yes, there are those who would shelter us." Sarah helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as they made their way to her horse. "My father will be worried sick," she murmured, more to herself than to Thomas. "The journal," Thomas said as she helped him mount. "It mentioned a locket. Gold with a small blue stone." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her throat, where beneath her dress hung the very locket he described. "This was my mother's," she said defensively. Thomas shook his head weakly. "It belonged to Morning Dove. Your father gave it to her." Before Sarah could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached them. Without hesitation, she swung up behind Thomas and urged her horse into motion, heading west away from the rising sun and the approaching riders. They traveled cautiously through the day, keeping to ravines and wooded areas when possible. Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness, his body burning with fever. By midday, Sarah knew they needed to stop. She found a small overhang by a creek that offered some shelter and helped Thomas dismount. "You should leave me," he said as she bathed his forehead with cool water from the creek. "Return to your father. Tell them I forced you to help me." "That wouldn't be the truth," Sarah replied firmly. "And I've never been particularly good at lying." A ghost of a smile crossed Thomas's lips. "Stubborn. The journal mentioned that too." Sarah wrung out the cloth and dipped it again in the creek water. "Tell me more about this journal. Why would my father write about me to a woman he knew before I was born?" Thomas closed his eyes, gathering strength to speak. "He wrote it over many years. The last entries were from just 2 years ago. He wrote about your mother's death, about raising you alone, about your spirit that reminded him of Morning Dove." Sarah sat back on her heels, stunned. 2 years ago? But that would mean... "He maintained contact with my mother's people," Thomas confirmed. "In secret. He provided medicines, warned them of army movements when he could." "That would be considered treason," Sarah whispered, the implications hitting her with full force. "To some," Thomas agreed. "To others, it would be seen as humanity in a time of barbarism." The sound of a twig snapping nearby silenced them both. Sarah reached for the small pistol she had taken from the cabin, her heart pounding in her chest. A figure emerged from the brush, not a soldier, but a young Comanche woman with fierce eyes and a bow drawn and ready. "Nana," she demanded, addressing Thomas. Thomas responded in the Comanche language, his voice stronger than it had been all day. The woman lowered her bow slightly, but kept her suspicious gaze fixed on Sarah. "This is Wind Dancer," Thomas explained to Sarah. She says she's been tracking us since the battlefield. She's from the canyon camp." Sarah slowly raised her empty hands to show she meant no harm. "Tell her I'm trying to help you." After Thomas translated, Wind Dancer's expression remained skeptical, but she lowered her bow completely. She spoke again, her tone urgent. "She says soldiers are coming," Thomas translated. "Not just from the fort, but from the south as well. They're converging on this area." Wind Dancer approached Sarah, studying her face intently before reaching out to touch the outline of the locket beneath Sarah's dress. She said something to Thomas, her eyes widening. "She recognizes the locket's description," Thomas explained. "It's part of our their history now. The chief's daughter and the white healer who loved her." Wind Dancer made a decision, gesturing for them to follow her. She disappeared back into the brush, returning moments later leading 2 horses. "She will guide us to the canyon," Thomas said. "But we must leave now." As Sarah helped Thomas onto one of the horses, she knew she was venturing further from everything familiar, deeper into territory few white women had ever seen. Yet something pulled her forward, a need to understand the connection between her father and these people, between her own life and Thomas's. Wind Dancer led them through hidden trails, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every rock and crevice of the land. By nightfall, they had covered impressive ground. Though Thomas's condition concerned Sarah, his fever had worsened, and the wound showed signs of infection despite her best efforts. They made camp in a small hollow surrounded by juniper trees. Wind Dancer disappeared briefly, returning with several plants which she crushed into a poultice, motioning for Sarah to apply it to Thomas's wound. "Medicine woman," Thomas murmured, watching Sarah work. "Like your father." "I only know what he taught me," Sarah replied, carefully applying the poultice. "It's not enough." Wind Dancer spoke softly to Thomas, who translated despite his weakened state. "She says we will reach the canyon by tomorrow evening. There is a healer there who can help." As the night deepened around them, Sarah found herself staring at the stars, thinking of her father back at the fort. Was he searching for her? Did he know where she might have gone? And what would he say if he knew she was learning truths about him that he had kept hidden all these years? "Your father is a good man," Thomas said, as if reading her thoughts. "He lives between 2 worlds, just as I do." Sarah turned to look at him, his features illuminated by the small fire Wind Dancer had built. "And what about me? Where do I belong in all of this?" Thomas held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "Perhaps that's what we're both trying to discover." In the distance, a wolf howled, the sound echoing across the vast Texas landscape. Sarah pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, knowing that with each mile they traveled, her old life receded further into the past. Ahead lay unknown territory, both in the physical world and in her understanding of herself and her history. The canyon appeared before them like a wound in the earth, its red rock walls stretching upward against the late afternoon sky. Wind Dancer led them down a narrow trail that switchbacked along the canyon wall, barely wide enough for their horses to navigate single file. Sarah kept her eyes fixed ahead, knowing that one misstep could send them plummeting to the rocks below. Thomas had grown worryingly quiet, conserving his strength as infection fought against his body. Sarah rode close behind him, ready to catch him should he start to fall. The journey had taken its toll on all of them, but Thomas most of all. As they descended deeper into the canyon, Sarah began to notice signs of habitation, small gardens terraced into the hillside, the remains of cooking fires, and finally, the dwellings themselves. Some were traditional tipis, others were structures built against the canyon walls, utilizing natural caves and overhangs. People emerged at their approach, first children who ran alongside their horses, then adults who regarded the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Wind Dancer called out, explaining their presence in rapid Comanche that Sarah couldn't understand. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face deeply lined, her eyes sharp as she assessed Thomas's condition. She barked orders that sent several younger women scurrying to prepare a place for him. Gray Hawk's mother, Thomas managed to explain to Sarah as they helped him dismount. The healer. The old woman, Gray Hawk's mother, examined Thomas's wound with practiced hands, speaking to Wind Dancer, who translated for Sarah. She says the infection is deep. She will try to draw it out, but his spirit must be strong to fight. Tell her I've been treating it as best I could, Sarah said, suddenly feeling defensive of her care. I'm trained in medicine, Western medicine. Wind Dancer relayed this, and the old woman's eyes settled on Sarah with new interest. She spoke again, her voice softening. She says she knows who you are, the daughter of Medicine Hand. Wind Dancer hesitated. That was what they called your father. Sarah felt a surge of emotions. Pride that her father was known and respected, confusion about the depth of his involvement with the Comanche, and uncertainty about her own place in this unfolding story. The old woman gestured for Sarah to follow as they carried Thomas into one of the larger dwellings. Inside, the air was fragrant with herbs hanging from the ceiling. A fire burned in a central pit, and Thomas was laid on a bed of soft furs near its warmth. To Sarah's surprise, the healer motioned for her to sit beside her as she began to work. She showed Sarah the plants she was using, demonstrating how to prepare them, including her in the healing process rather than excluding her. She respects your knowledge, Wind Dancer explained, watching from the entrance. She says 2 medicines are stronger than 1. Throughout the evening, Sarah worked alongside the old healer, learning techniques she had never seen before while offering her own insights about the wound. They developed a rhythm together, communicating through gestures and the few words Wind Dancer translated when necessary. As night fell, the fever finally broke. Thomas opened his eyes, clearer than they had been in days, and looked at Sarah with recognition. You stayed, he said simply. Yes, she replied, brushing damp hair from his forehead. I stayed. The old healer spoke, nodding approvingly as she gathered her medicines. She says you have healing hands like your father, Wind Dancer translated, but also a healing heart like your mother. Sarah looked up sharply. My mother? Did she know my mother? Wind Dancer conferred with the old woman before answering. No, she speaks of your true mother, Morning Dove. My mother was Elizabeth Mitchell, Sarah said firmly. She died when I was 12. The old woman spoke again, her tone gentle but insistent. She says the woman who raised you is good and should be honored, Wind Dancer translated carefully. But you are the daughter of Morning Dove and Medicine Hand. The locket proves it. Sarah's hand went to the locket around her neck. That's impossible, she whispered. Yet even as she denied it, pieces began falling into place. Her father's overprotectiveness, her darker complexion compared to both her parents, the strange looks from the older officers at the fort who had known her father the longest. Thomas reached for her hand. Your father's journal. He wrote of his heartbreak when he had to leave you behind with Morning Dove. He was being transferred, and it was too dangerous for her to go with him. When he returned years later, he found that she had died in a smallpox outbreak. You were being raised by her sister, but sickness was spreading through the camp. He took you, claiming you were his child with his absent wife. No, Sarah said, pulling her hand away and standing abruptly. This is madness. My father would have told me, would he? Thomas asked gently. In a world where such a union would be condemned? Where you might be treated as less than human if the truth were known? Sarah stumbled from the dwelling, needing air, needing space to think. Outside, the canyon was bathed in moonlight, the stars impossibly bright overhead. She made her way to the edge of the small stream that ran through the canyon floor and sat on a flat rock, her mind reeling. Wind Dancer approached silently, sitting beside her without speaking for several long minutes. How did they know? Sarah finally asked. About the locket, about me? Stories are passed down, Wind Dancer replied in halting English, surprising Sarah. And your father, he comes sometimes. Brings medicine. Speaks of his daughter at the fort. If what you say is true, then I single quotes double quotes. Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. You are who you have always been, Wind Dancer said simply. Daughter of 2 worlds, like Thomas. Sarah looked back toward the dwelling where Thomas rested. Is that why he sought me out? Because we share this heritage? Wind Dancer shook her head. He found the journal after a raid. It was chance, or perhaps the spirits guiding him. For hours, Sarah sat by the stream, watching the water flow over stones. Constant yet ever-changing, like the truth of her own life, she realized. The identity she had taken for granted had been washed away, revealing something more complex beneath. When she finally returned to the healer's dwelling, Thomas was asleep. Sarah sat beside him, studying his face, the features that blended his dual heritage as hers apparently did. "I need to speak with my father," she said to the old healer, who was tending the fire. "I need to hear the truth from him." The old woman nodded in understanding, though she couldn't comprehend Sarah's words. Some truths transcended language. As dawn approached, Sarah made her decision. She would remain until Thomas was strong enough to travel, then find a way to contact her father, to confront him with what she had learned and to hear his explanation. Only then could she truly understand who she was and where she belonged. The canyon was beginning to stir with morning activities when a young boy burst into the camp, shouting urgently in Comanche. Winged Dancer appeared at the dwelling entrance, her expression grave. "Soldiers," she said to Sarah, "many soldiers, coming to the canyon." Panic erupted through the canyon as families rushed to gather essentials, mothers calling frantically for children who had been playing by the stream. Sarah emerged from the healer's dwelling to find Thomas already on his feet, though pale and unsteady. "How did they find this place?" she asked, supporting him as they moved outside. "Someone must have betrayed the location," Thomas replied grimly. "Or they followed our trail." The thought struck Sarah with horror. Had she inadvertently led the soldiers here? Had her decision to help Thomas now endangered an entire community? Wind Dancer approached, carrying Sarah's saddlebag and a rifle. "There is a path through the back of the canyon," she explained urgently. "The elders, children, and wounded are already leaving. You must go with them." "And you?" Sarah asked, noting the determined set of Wind Dancer's jaw. "Some of us will remain to slow the soldiers," she replied, checking the rifle's ammunition. "Give the others time to escape." Thomas shook his head. "I should stay and fight." "You can barely stand," Sarah pointed out. "And I won't leave you." A commotion at the canyon entrance drew their attention. A lone rider on a lathered horse galloped into the camp, and Sarah felt her heart skip a beat as she recognized him, her father, Dr. James Mitchell. He dismounted quickly, his eyes scanning the chaos until they landed on Sarah. Relief and fear battled across his features as he rushed toward her. "Sarah, thank God you're alive." He embraced her tightly before holding her at arm's length to examine her. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Father," she replied, studying his face, searching for confirmation of everything she had learned. "But how did you find me?" "I followed the search parties," he explained hastily. "When I realized they were heading for this canyon, I rode ahead. The cavalry is less than an hour behind me." His gaze shifted to Thomas, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You're Blue Eagle's son," he said quietly. "I should have known you'd find each other eventually." "Is it true?" Sarah demanded, her voice breaking. Am I not Elizabeth's daughter? Am I half Comanche?" Her father's face crumpled, the weight of 24 years of secrets suddenly visible in the new lines that formed around his eyes. "I wanted to tell you so many times," he whispered. "But I was afraid of losing you, afraid of what others would do if they knew." "The journal?" Thomas asked. "My way of preserving the truth," Dr. Mitchell admitted. "For when the time came that Sarah should know." A shout from the canyon rim interrupted them. The first scouts of the cavalry had arrived. The remaining warriors took positions, preparing to defend the escape route. "There's no time for this now," Dr. Mitchell said urgently. "Sarah, you must go with the others. I'll return to the soldiers and try to divert them. Tell them I found no sign of you or the Comanche here." "They won't believe you," Thomas said. "And they'll hang you for aiding the enemy if they suspect." "It's a risk I'm willing to take," Dr. Mitchell replied firmly. "I've lived a life of compromise for too long." Sarah looked between her father and Thomas, the two halves of her heritage embodied in these men. "There must be another way," she insisted. Wind Dancer, who had been watching the ridge, suddenly spoke up. "The storm," she said, pointing to dark clouds gathering rapidly to the west. If it comes soon, it will cover the escape. As if in response to her words, the first rumble of thunder echoed through the canyon. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. "We need to create a diversion," Thomas said, his strength seemingly returning with the urgency of the situation. "Draw their attention to the canyon entrance while the others escape through the back." Dr. Mitchell nodded. "I can help with that. If I ride back toward them, claiming I've been captured and escaped, I can lead them on a false trail." "Too dangerous," Sarah protested. "They might shoot you before you can explain." "I'll go with him," Thomas decided. "Two men will be more convincing than one, and they're less likely to fire on a white man." The old healer emerged from her dwelling, carrying small pouches which she pressed into Sarah's hands, speaking urgently to Wind Dancer. "She says you must take these medicines," Wind Dancer translated. "And you must remember what she taught you. The knowledge must survive." Sarah clutched the pouches, understanding the responsibility being placed on her shoulders. "Tell her I will," she promised. The first drops of rain began to fall as the group finalized their plan. The majority of the camp's inhabitants would escape through the hidden back passage, while Dr. Mitchell and Thomas would create a diversion at the front, hopefully drawing the soldiers away long enough for the others to reach safety. "And me?" Sarah asked. "Where do I go?" Her father and Thomas exchanged glances. "You belong with your people," her father said gently. "All of your people. You can be a bridge between worlds, Sarah, in ways I never could be." "Go with Wind Dancer," Thomas urged. "Help keep the others safe. Use your knowledge, both kinds of medicine." The rain was falling heavily now, and in the distance, lightning illuminated the silhouettes of approaching riders. It was time to move. Sarah embraced her father fiercely. "Promise me you'll both find a way back," she demanded. "We'll try," he assured her, his voice thick with emotion. "But whatever happens, know that I have always been proud of you, prouder than you can imagine." She turned to Thomas, words failing her. He reached out to touch the locket at her throat. "This belongs to you now," he said simply. "A symbol of both worlds." Wind Dancer tugged at Sarah's arm, urging her toward the back of the canyon where the others were already moving out. With a final glance at the two men who represented her past and possibly her future, Sarah followed. The storm raged around them as they climbed the steep path out of the canyon, rain turning the ground treacherous underfoot. Sarah helped the elderly and children, applying her medical skills when one of the young boys slipped and gashed his leg on a rock. All the while, her thoughts remained with her father and Thomas, hoping their diversion was successful. They had traveled several miles from the canyon when the sound of gunfire reached them, distant but unmistakable through the storm. Sarah paused, looking back, her heart constricting with fear. Wind Dancer placed a hand on her shoulder. "We must continue," she said firmly, "or their sacrifice means nothing." As night fell, the group made camp in a sheltered grove, the storm gradually moving eastward. Sarah sat apart from the others, the weight of everything she had learned pressing down on her. She opened the locket, studying the small portrait inside that she had always believed was her mother, Elizabeth Mitchell. Now she wondered if the woman's features had been altered to hide the truth, to make the resemblance to Sarah less obviously Comanche. Wind Dancer approached, offering a cup of hot tea. "The elders have decided," she said, sitting beside Sarah. "When we reach the winter grounds, they will tell you stories of Mourning Dove, your mother." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, accepting both the tea and the gesture of acceptance it represented. "And what of your father and Thomas?" Wind Dancer asked. "If they survive, how will they find us?" Sarah closed the locket, a plan forming in her mind. "They won't have to find us," she said with newfound determination. "Because I'm going back for them." Wind Dancer's eyes widened. "The soldiers will eventually leave," Sarah finished. "And when they do, I'll return to the canyon. My father and Thomas are clever. If they escaped, they'll make their way back there too." For the first time since the chaos began, Wind Dancer smiled. "You are stubborn," she observed, "like your mother was said to be." Sarah returned the smile. feeling a connection to this unknown woman who had given her life. "Tell me about her," she requested. "Tell me about Morning Dove." As the camp settled for the night, Wind Dancer began to speak, weaving the story of a chief's daughter who had fallen in love with a captured army doctor. Sarah listened intently, each word helping to complete the puzzle of her identity, daughter of two worlds, destined perhaps to help bridge the divide between them. In the distance, the storm moved on, leaving the sky clear and brilliant with stars. Sarah gazed up at them, wondering if her father and Thomas were looking at the same stars, if they had survived. She touched the locket at her throat, a tangible connection to both her past and her future. "I will find you," she whispered to the night sky, "and together we will find a way forward." The journey ahead would be difficult, the path uncertain. But for the first time in her life, Sarah Mitchell felt she was truly beginning to understand who she was meant to be.